Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into something totally fascinating, what I like to call the ultimate biological teamwork. You know, just like making a high-end outfit requires a bunch of different materials coming together seamlessly, building a living organism takes millions of tiny units collaborating perfectly. And this extraordinary level of teamwork, we call it a tissue. So that brings us to a big question. Why do cells actually form these little gangs? Well, imagine trying to do every single job in a massive, bustling city all by yourself. It'd be completely impossible, right? Cells face the exact same problem. So they team up to divide the labor. By grouping together into a tissue, they can knock out specific tasks way more efficiently. It's literally the ultimate division of work, a group of similar cells linking up to get things done fast and effectively. All right, here's our roadmap for today. We're going to cover water tissues, plant versus animal needs, the engines of growth, permanent tissues, xylem and phloem transport, and finally, protective layers. And just a heads up, we're focusing all our attention today on the incredible taxonomic tree of the plant kingdom. Okay, let's kick things off with plant versus animal needs. Now, a plant's lifestyle is, well, pretty stationary. It isn't exactly running around hunting for its next meal. And because it just stands there, it uses a lot less energy than an animal. But it does require a massive amount of structural support just to stay upright against gravity and the wind. Because of that, a lot of plant tissues are actually just dead, supportive cells, and they only grow in very specific, localized spots. Animals, on the flip side, are always on the move. We need high energy, lots of living, flexible tissues to bend and jump, and our bodies have to grow uniformly. It's a completely different survival strategy. Moving right along to our next section, the engines of growth. So how do we define meristematic tissue? Think of these cells as like the young, hyper-ambitious professionals in a high-stress startup. They are always hustling, constantly dividing to make the plant grow. And because they're always moving so fast, they're tiny. They have absolutely zero intercellular space. Seriously, picture runates packed into a tiny studio apartment. And they completely lack vacuoles. They just don't have the space or the time to store anything. These meristematic hustlers operate in three main zones. First up, you've got apical meristems. These sit right at the very tips of the roots and shoots, constantly pushing the plant taller and deeper into the soil. Next are intercalary meristems, found right at the nodes, basically the middle of the stem. If you ever mow the lawn and wonder how a cut blade of grass miraculously regrows, that's the intercalary tissue at work. And finally, lateral meristems sit on the sides. They expand the plant's girth, making a tree trunk thicker and thicker over time. But here's the kicker. This whole process leads to something called differentiation, because what happens when a dividing meristematic cell finally just burns out? It decides to settle down and secure a comfortable, permanent government job. It stops dividing completely and takes on a permanent shape, size, and function. That exact moment of specialization, that is differentiation. Which leads us perfectly into our next section, settling down with permanent tissues. Now, these permanent jobs basically come in two flavors. You've got simple permanent tissues, which are made entirely of just one type of cell. Imagine an office where literally every single person does the exact same job. Then you have complex permanent tissues. These are made up of multiple types of cells all working together, functioning a lot more like a diverse society where different specialists collaborate to achieve a common goal. Let's look at the simple tissues first. I want you to lock this brilliant PCS mnemonic into your brain. P is for parents, that's parenchyma. Just like your parents, these living cells hold on to things, storing and packaging food for the plant. C is for collar, collenchyma. Think of a flexible shirt collar. These are living tissues that allow the plant to actually bend in the wind without snapping in half. And finally, S is for solid, sclerenchyma. These are extremely hard, dead cells packed full of a tough material called lignin. They provide hardcore mechanical support. Just picture the incredibly hard outer shell of a coconut, and you've got it. Now, even within those parent storage cells, the parenchyma, you've got some brilliant specialists. For instance, chlorenchyma is packed with chloroplasts. Thanks to all that green chlorophyll, its one specific job is to synthesize food. Then you have erenchyma. This tissue features these large air cavities that basically act like built-in balloons. If you've ever marveled at a lotus leaf floating perfectly on top of a pond, you're actually looking at erenchyma providing that crucial buoyancy. Okay, let's shift gears to section 4, xylem and phloem transport. So the xylem is basically a one-way water elevator. Its only job is to transport water and minerals straight up from the roots to the rest of the plant, entirely unidirectional. The phloem, though, that's a two-way highway. The leaves synthesize the food, and the phloem transports that food both upwards to the growing shoots and downwards to the roots, totally bidirectional. Now, think about this. Pushing heavy water all the way up a massive tree against gravity takes some serious structural integrity. Because of that, almost all the components of the xylem, the tracheids, the vessels, the xylem fibers, are completely dead and rock hard. Literally, the only living component in that whole system is the xylem parenchyma, which just handles a bit of localized storage along the way. But then, look at the phloem. It's dealing with a delicate transport of food, so it relies heavily on living tissues to get the job done. It uses living sieve tubes as pathways, paired right up with living companion cells that actively manage the transport. You've also got living phloem parenchyma. In this entire setup, only the phloem fibers are dead, and they're really just there to give a tiny bit of structural support to the whole operation. Which brings us to our final section, the ultimate protective layers. Meet the epidermis. This is the outermost layer of flat, living cells on young plants. It's literally the plant's skin. Now, if you look at desert plants, like a cactus, the skin develops a super thick, waxy layer right on top called a cuticle. It is a brilliant adaptation. It completely seals the plant, stopping it from losing all its water under the blazing hot sun. If we zoom way in on that epidermis, we find stomata. These are tiny, microscopic pores scattered across the surface of a leaf. And they're guarded by two guard cells that act exactly like nightclub bouncers. When these cells swell up with water, they pull open the pore. That lets the plant breathe in carbon dioxide and exhale oxygen. But maybe most importantly, it facilitates transpiration, which is basically just the plant sweating out excess water to cool itself down. But hey, plants age just like we do. As a tree grows older, its soft, living epidermis is completely replaced by cork. Notice the difference here. The epidermis is living and thin on young leaves, but cork is that dead, tough bark you see on older trees. The cells in cork have extremely thick walls filled with this unique gel-like substance called suberin. This stuff acts like a heavy-duty biological sealant, making the bark totally waterproof and gas-proof, keeping the precious inside of the tree safe and sound. And that brings us to the end of our journey. Next time you're outside and you see a towering tree bending gracefully in a massive windstorm without snapping, I really want you to ask yourself, which microscopic team of cells is hard at work right now? I hope this explainer totally changes how you look at the plants around you. It's pretty amazing to think about the tiny, unseen cellular gangs working silently around the clock to keep our world green. Keep wondering and keep learning.